Hey there. Welcome to the Literary Escape Podcast. I'm your host, Becky, and I'm glad you're here today. On the Literary Escape Podcast, we talk about books. We talk about escapes that we can have through our books. And I always have some great book recommendations for you. So, buckle up and let's see where we're going today. Enjoy the show. Welcome to my first episode of season 2, the first episode of 2022, which is crazy to even say, of the Literary Escape Podcast. I am your host, Becky, and I'm so excited that you're here. You are interested in traveling the world through books, then you're in the right place. I will offer you book recommendations, author recommendations, and so much more. Thanks for joining me. Today, I thought that I would, instead of starting off the new year quite yet, I thought I would end up last year. So I wanted to do an episode on the best of 2021. And I am doing this based on books and authors that were in the Literary Escape Book Club this past year. We had a full season last year in the Literary Escape Book Club. Every month, I have 2 books that we read that are set in a destination, and then one of the authors joins us at the end of the month. And so over December, I put polls out every week to find out what everybody's favorite books were and who everybody's favorite authors were. And so this episode is going to wrap all of that up. It was a lot of fun to see which books and which authors resonated, and it helps me moving forward to know what kind of books that everybody wrote. So I'm going to start with books. The third runner-up of the favorite books for 2021 was The Chocolatier by Jan Moran. The Chocolatier is a historical fiction set it starts out in San Francisco, but then it goes to Italy, mostly to the Amalfi Coast. And we read this book back in May, and it obviously was a favorite book. And it is about a woman who lost her husband after the war, and she thinks that his family needs to know that he has passed away. And so she tries to get a hold of them. They are a big chocolate family in Italy. They have one of the top chocolate factories in Italy. And so she is trying to get a hold of them, and all kinds of mysteries start coming up, and secrets from the family, secrets from her husband. So it's a really, really interesting story. And it's got lots of delicious sounding chocolate in it, which is always lovely. When we were reading the book, almost everybody in the group that read the book commented that they had to go out and get some chocolate while they were reading the book. So be forewarned, you might have to eat some chocolate while you're reading this book. If you'd like to hear a little bit more about this or about Jan Moran, episode number 5 is part of my interview with her in the Literary Escape Book Club. I will link to that in show notes so that if you'd like to listen to it, you can. So the third runner-up for Best of 2021 books was The Chocolatier by Jan Moran. The second runner-up is the very first book that we read in the book club, 80 Days to Elsewhere by Casey Dyer. This was a fan favorite. It took us all around the world. It is a kind of a remake of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. And we wound up reading both of those books during January of last year, which was super interesting. I had never read the classic, and so it was really interesting to read it and then to read the new book. So it was a lot of fun. And this book is about a woman in New York who, the short recap of it is that she's trying to get a job to save her family bookstore. And the job is going to take her around the world, retracing Jules Verne's or Phileas Fogg's steps in Around the World in 80 Days. She has not traveled outside of New York maybe ever. And probably, it's been a long time if ever. And so she has to really put herself out there to do this, to try and get this job. So there's lots of mayhem that ensues along the journey, lots of fun adventures, lots of scary adventures, and it all comes together so nicely. There's a lot more to the book, but I am going to leave you there with it. Episode number 30, which was just a couple episodes ago, I interviewed Casey Dyer, the author of this book, and caught up with her. We talked about 80 Days to Elsewhere and her new book that has just come out. And so take a listen to episode number 30 and you'll hear all about 80 Days to Elsewhere. You'll hear about her new book that is coming out, that has just come out. And you'll want to read that book. It, like I said, it takes you around the world and a lot of fun. So that was our second runner-up for the best of 2021 books, 80 Days to Elsewhere by Casey Dyer. And the favorite book of the book club from 2021 was The Last Bookshop in London by Madeleine Martin. This is a historical fiction set during World War II, obviously in London, since it's The Last Bookshop in London. And it is about a young woman who moves from the countryside into the city of London right before the war breaks out, I guess. There's a couple different stories going on, but the big one for me was her relationship with books, which she didn't have one prior to moving to London. And she wound up getting a job in a bookshop and meets a man who introduces her to books. And she starts this relationship with books that takes her and many other people through the war. And it is just so beautifully written and such a great story. I highly recommend reading that one. I have an interview from the book club with Madeleine Martin. It's episode number 10. So you can go back and listen to that and catch a little bit about the book and a little bit about Madeleine Martin. But those were our top 3 favorite books from 2021. Number 1 was The Last Bookshop in London by Madeleine Martin. Number 2 was 80 Days to Elsewhere by Casey Dyer. And number 3 was The Chocolatier by Jan Moran. So 3 fabulous books. You're definitely going to want to go check them out if you haven't read them yet. I was going to say our 3 favorite authors from 2021, but it's actually 4 favorite authors because we had a tie for 3rd place. So we'll start with number 3. These are the authors that joined us in the book club in 2021. And the same thing happened with the books, but in the first round, every single book and every single author got votes, which was really cool to see because that means that they resonated with the group. And it's so hard with so many good books and so many good authors to narrow it down to just like one favorite one. And I know that everybody had a hard time doing this, and I completely appreciated that they were willing to at least give it a try. But so here's our favorite authors. The 3rd runner-ups, since there were 2 of them, Casey Dyer, who I just talked about a few minutes ago. Her book 80 Days to Elsewhere was what kicked off the book club. And she was a lot of fun to talk to. We really enjoyed her visit. And again, I interviewed her on episode 30 for a catch up with her. It was 1 year since she had been on, and I wanted to share with her how I chose her and what it was like on my end, and then find out what she's been up to over the past year. So check out episode number 30, get to know Casey Dyer a little bit, and check out some of her books. They're a lot of fun. Our other 3rd runner-up was author Connie Mann. We had her in our book club in July of last year, and our destination was Florida, and she has some really great romantic suspense books set in Florida. They are set in Ocala, Florida, or that area, and they take place along the river, and it's a group of Florida wildlife officers, and really, really interesting, really good mysteries or suspense stories, and there's a little bit of romance, but the suspense is definitely takes the front and center on these books. So if you enjoy suspenseful books with a little bit of romance, you're definitely going to want to check out Connie Mann. These books, like I said, are set in Florida. They are not at the glitzy, on the beachfront or at Disney or anything like that. They are in the real Florida, as I live in Florida. So this is the part with all the bugs and all the trees and all the alligators. And we have a bazillion rivers and bodies of water in Florida. And so it kind of touches on all of that, which I really enjoyed, because that's the Florida that those of us who live here actually see. So check out Connie Mann. She is on episode number 6. Her interview from our book club, I put some of that in episode number 6, and you'll definitely want to read her books if you enjoy a good romantic suspense. So those were our third runner-up for favorite authors, Casey Dyer and Connie Mann. Our second runner-up is Sonali Dev. We had her on in February. She has a series of books that are Jane Austen remakes. And for February, we read Pride and Prejudice, and then we read her retelling of it, which was Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. It was a fabulous retelling of Pride and Prejudice, so very different from the original as far as the characters go. It's a Indian family that is set in San Francisco, and the roles are reversed a bit, and it is just everything you want out of a classic, but yet completely different. So I highly, highly recommend it. She has 4 in the series right now. Let's see, Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma, I think, are the 4 that are retold thus far. So if you're a Jane Austen fan, you'll definitely want to check these out if you haven't already. And if you're not a Jane Austen fan, you're still going to love them because they're completely redone. Kind of turns Jane Austen on her head. So Sonali Dev is our second runner-up author for the best of 2021. And if you haven't read her yet, I definitely recommend checking her out. Our favorite author for the best of 2021 book club season was Rhys Bowen. We had Rhys Bowen join us in April in the book club, and our destination was Buckingham Palace, and we read her book Above the Bay of Angels. It was set in, as you might guess, Buckingham Palace, but it also went to the coast in France, to Nice, and just gorgeous, gorgeous landscaping. And it is historical, set back in the time of, I think it was Queen Mary, and just so interesting. And to hear the story of how she chose, how the inspiration for the story, how she found the hotel that Queen Mary stayed at, and so interesting. So she was episode number 2 on the podcast, and it's a portion of the interview I did with her in our book club last April, and you'll definitely want to check her out. She also writes historical mysteries, and her Royal Spinus series is phenomenal. I have read all of those and absolutely love them. I just finished the last one in the series last month, and I'm impatiently waiting for the next one already. So check out Rhys Bowen if you have not read her yet and you enjoy historical novels, historical mysteries. So interesting, so interesting. Her research is top notch, and she gets it right. And so check out Rhys Bowen, check out episode number 2 that I had a piece of my conversation with her, and you'll have some really great reads for this year. So that was our best of 2021 in the book club, in the Literary Escape Book Club. So for the authors, I had the number 1 was Rhys Bowen. We had her in the book club in April. Number 2, second place was Sonali Dev. We had her in the book club in February when we did a retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And then our third runner-ups were Connie Mann with her romantic suspense set in Florida, and Casey Dyer, who was kicked off our book club way back in January of last year. And the best of books from 2021 were The Last Bookshop of London was our favorite. 80 Days to Elsewhere by Casey Dyer was second place, and The Chocolatier by Jan Moran was third. I hope you'll check out these authors. I hope you'll check out these books. I promise you they are all worth your time. And I look forward to seeing what you read, what we read also in 2022. So thanks for joining me in this episode. I look forward to sharing so much more this year with you. And happy 2022.
Thanks for joining me today on the Literary Escapes podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and maybe would like some more Literary Escape book recommendations, then come check out the Literary Escape Society. We're a community of travelers who love books, or maybe book lovers who love to travel. Either way, if you need an escape, a literary escape, come join us as we read our way around the world together, one book at a time. Check out the show notes to learn more about the Literary Escape Society. And we'll see you next time on the next episode.